Why can my voice get so quiet? When do I start shrinking into silence? This is a question I've asked myself, where I'm trying to pinpoint the moment in my life where I turned to silence for safety, where shrinking felt necessary for survival. I'm trying to understand how I once existed without hearing my own voice, a voice that stays with me long after everyone else disappears. And so I asked myself that question, thinking about the moments in my life where I turned to silence. I know I do my best to avoid hurting others. I know I'm careful with people. I'm careful with my words. And I can put their comfort before my own. And the question then for me becomes not why it started, but why it stayed for so long, where my mind was practicing the silence and rehearsing it over and over again. It disguised itself as perfectionism, this fear of disappointing others, fear of disappointing myself, my parents, bosses, colleagues, friends, siblings. And it wasn't just something that lived in my mind. It also lived in my body. And it showed up in the way that I sit, in the way that my legs cross without me noticing. It shows in the way that my shoulders drop. There's a pull inward, as if shrinking were safer. And I took that posture with me everywhere. I took it to conversations with friends. I took it to meetings, dinners, presentations. I especially took it to conversations with Mama and Baba, specifically the ones that revolve around the big life decisions. I was trying to convince my dad that leaving the warm and beautiful nest that they've created and moving 10,000 kilometers away was the right choice at 17. And I didn't want to overstep. I want to respect his guidance. I want to respect my parents' push and support. He was encouraging me to follow my older sister's footsteps. And while it was a well-supported path, it was a life I couldn't envision for myself. And so I had to muster up the courage and have that conversation. Because the reality of following that path was so dishonest. It wasn't me. And so I interrupted Baba's precious couch and TV time, and I spoke up. And my voice shook, but it was mine. And it wasn't them that I fear. It's that these conversations, they carry weight. And I'm trying to carefully craft my communication to respect that. I'm trying to respect and honor the history of the traditions and expectations that sit between us. That in these conversations, there's that feeling of this is how we've always done it. We have these systems that we move through. We have these unspoken of rules that we follow. And these rules become a pattern. We stand when someone respected enters the room. We offer the good seat to the guests. We listen quietly when someone is talking, and we choose our words carefully. We decide who begins the meal. who speaks, who listens, and who whispers. And these virtues, they create a system that functions and that creates belonging. But I pause and I ponder, who am I listening to? Like, actually, who am I really listening to? Because these systems, they move in the spaces that we go to. It doesn't just stay at home. They follow me into my classroom. How often do I quote Newton, Darwin, Hubble? And then how often do I mention Tiansheng Wu, a physicist who rewrote fundamental laws of physics, only to watch the Nobel Prize be awarded to the men who built on her work? How often do I give credit to Fatma al-Fihri, the woman who founded the world's first university? I don't give her much credit in my classroom. And so we decide who deserves space in our textbook pages and in our classrooms and who does not. And it wasn't chosen, their silence. It wasn't their personalities. It wasn't their temperament. It was designed. Because when space is systematically uneven, voice becomes something that can be erased, dismissed, and granted. And so I'm not just asking myself, whose voice am I hearing, but whose voice was I never allowed to hear? And discernment becomes the skill. You identify the source and you test its claim. Is it Mama's hope, Baba's caution, my siblings' worries, a boss's guidance, my fear of failing myself? God. And I'm not talking about thinking positive. It's about clearing the landscape of your mind, paying closer attention to what's grown in the square footage of your mind with awareness. In Arabic, the word niyya means intention, that it's not just what you do, but why you do it. Our integrity and peace lives in that alignment, when action and intention speak the same language. And so I take the time to learn these rules as a way to honor and respect my family, to respect the tradition and the history that they carry. And so I want you to walk away with the feeling of paying closer attention to what has occupied space in your mind, whose voices you're hearing, and noticing where they come from before accepting them to be your truth. Notice whether this is an echo that you've mistaken for truth. Because every thought you repeat and every feeling you feel settles like a root beneath the surface. And they grow into the branches that shape your life, the path that you walk. Because learning to hear your inner voice is a lifelong act of courage and calibration, but it's your most powerful teacher. Thank you.